How's it going, everyone? My name is Matt and welcome back into the channel. Today I am bringing you a deck profile for Fire King Snake Eye Azamina, the deck that I piloted at the remote YCS this past weekend. It was my first time doing a remote YCS ever and I had a really good time. Overall, the event was a lot of fun, a lot of really cool matches, a lot of cool opportunities to learn and play some competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously, remote YCSs are going to have their own bit of hurdles and hiccups because this one we had over here actually had a ton of delays between the events. But that being said, it was a great time nonetheless. I ended up playing the Fire King Snake Eye Azamina deck, and in my opinion, it's the best deck in the format by a pretty substantial margin above something like Tenpai Dragon. But it does have its weaknesses, obviously. It did not end up winning the whole event. I think Tenpai ended up taking the whole thing. But either way, I am really confident with the list that I had. It's not the most optimal list because I'm missing a singular card in the list, and that does make obviously some drastic changes. That card is going to be Fool Loss. So other than that, the deck is pretty much exactly how I would play us, minus Fool Loss. If you have that card, play it. I have a few adjustments I make in the side, but that's really it other than that. So I do think overall this deck is really well suited to compete in the meta, and if you have the funds and the desire to play this deck, then absolutely go ahead and do it. But with that being said, I want to go ahead and jump on into it, and before we do, make sure to smash the like button, and of course subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh videos. But let's hop on in. Starting off with our main deck, we have of course our Fire King engine. Starting off, we of course have 3 Fire King Alchenics. This card is incredible. It is a play starter for you. It is an extender for you. It is what makes the deck, the Fire King version of the deck, the best way to play the Snake Eye cards, in my opinion. The way it works is on summon, normal, or special, you can destroy another fire in hand or field and search for any Fire King monster. It's also great because you can modify its level depending on the level of the monster you added. So if you added a level 8 to hand, you can make this level 8. If you added a level 1 to hand, like Ponix, you can make this card level 1. And that's really important for really critical Xyz plays, so just keep that in mind. You have to declare that effect though, that it's changing its level, so make sure you actually declare that. And if it's destroyed by a card effect, you can summon out the original Garunix from the deck, as my glare is really awful there, so I'll do my best to kind of work around that. Original Garunix, you have to play it in this deck because you're playing the Alchenics. It is mandatory because of that reason. It's an extender. You can pop the Alchenics with your Garunix, the new Garunix, to summon this one from the deck, overlay them into a rank 8, which is really nice as well. We are of course playing the 1 copy of Ponix. This is insane in the deck. I wouldn't play more than 1. I debated 2 for a second, but I decided I would just stick with the 1 copy. It's so good to have at 1. We also have the 1 Arvada as our negate for monster effects. Really nice. Great because it can help us loop our copy of Kirin as well, which is great because if we get them out of rotation from our deck or field, we have to find a way to get them back onto the field, and Arvada is the exact way we do that, which is really nice. We have Sacred Fire King Garunix, which is like the reason why the deck is able to function so well, because you can constantly bring it back from hand or graveyard, pop cards from pretty much anywhere, gain the attack, get you extra advantage. It's a level 8 body. There's so much advantage with Garunix, and yeah, such an amazing card. And then 3 copies of Kirin to round out our Fire King monsters. I think again, Kirin at 3 copies is, in my opinion, mandatory. Some people have decided to play 2 copies. I love having 3. I don't have to worry about popping a Kirin on the field just to make sure I have another resource in deck later on. I want to be able to just pop the Kirin in deck, and that way I can kind of play from there, and I don't lose a body on field as well, which can be really critical to extend really well. Kirin's great because it's a non-target pop. It helps you play through infinite impermanence as well. Just a really solid card, and you definitely want to play it in your list. We are also rocking with our Snake Eye package with 1 Ash, 1 Poplar, 1 Oak, and 1 Flamberge Dragon. These cards are obviously incredible. You definitely want to see them. Not really Poplar, not really Oak, not really Flamberge, obviously, but the whole point is if you see one, you kind of see them all, which is really nice with the exception of Flamberge. But overall, I want to see Snake Eye Ash as often as possible. It's such an amazing card. And the reason why I love Flamberge in this deck particularly is twofold. Number 1, against a deck like Tenpai Dragon, if they don't go for like Shifter on you, for example, you can use Flamberge to play something that they end up sending to graveyard. If it's like a Fool Loss or Perulia, you can use Flamberge effect to place in the spell and trap zone, and because they control a face-up card, they can no longer use the effect of Lightning Storm, which is really critical. It's also great to kind of play around additional copies of Fool Loss Perulia that they might end up drawing throughout their combo because they can't activate it at that point either, which is really nice. And it can get you 2 extra bodies on the field, 2 level 1 bodies of that, so you can overlay them into a copy of Fucho to make sure you survive. which is really nice. And yeah, that's going to be our Snake Eye monsters. We then have, of course, 3 copies of Diabellstar the Black Witch. Shout out to Rarity for reprinting this. This card is insane. You definitely want to have it. It is like the first action I would go for because it's going to be a card that has to be answered immediately. And if it gets answered, then I can go ahead and proceed with my other plays. And it's really solid here because, again, this card is an extender for you. It's a great body, being a dark monster to go into Dark the Dark Charmer. Being a 2500 attack body is also good to attack just over things like SP and so on. Really good card. Love it. Comes up all the time. Sometimes I would side out the third copy rather in game 2 if I won, and depending on how I felt about the matchup, I'd go into game 3 with another copy sided out as well. I just don't feel like I need to have all of them in my deck for all 3 games. We then have our Fire King spell and traps, or spell cards rather. I'm playing the Sanctuary, the Island, and the Skyburn here. I think Skyburn is so good in this format. Just the ability to pop spell and trap cards is really critical, and the only way you can do that in this deck right now is with Kieran. And sometimes you don't want to loop Kieran to pop a spell trap, you want to loop it to pop a monster, which is obviously a bit more advantageous. So Skyburn having that way to be able to not only pop your cards to gain advantage, but pop your opponents is really nice. It does have the second effect in the graveyard where you can banish it to prevent the destruction of your Fire King monsters, which is really good. And other than that, Sanctuary, being able to get you Island is great, being able to protect the Island, also fantastic, but more importantly than that, the fact that you can go into the Quick Exceeds as well is really good in this list. Then I'm playing 3 copies of Wanted. Of course, this is part of our Diabellstar engine with the 1 OSS. We're also playing 1 Deception and 1 Hallowed Azamina. This is my Wanted / Azamina package. I debated playing a second Deception. I don't like drawing the card though. I really don't like drawing it. The reason why I would play a second one is only if I'm in a situation where Deception gets sent to graveyard and I have no way of getting it back to hand because it wasn't set from the face-up field to the graveyard. So that's why I would play a second copy. I never felt like it came up for me. I wasn't really missing it, so I was just happy to play the 1 copy. Hallowed Azamina is crazy, gets you access to your Azamina monsters for a negate, for extension, really solid. And then OSS is just, it's OSS. It's going to summon out a level 1 fire from the deck. It's going to recycle your resources back as well. Want is going to recycle back the OSS, and you can just keep doing the loop over and over and over again. We then have 3 copies of Bonfire, which is going to be it for our engine. This searches for Snake Eye Ash, a great card. In one of my rounds, I actually drew all 3 copies of Bonfire, which was great. I think I drew the first 2 right away with a Wanted. I then drew off of the Wanted effect into the 3rd copy of Bonfire, so that was just fantastic. As for my non-engine, I'm rocking with 3 copies of Ash Blossom. I have 3 Infinite Impermanence here. I also have 3 copies of Dominus Impulse. Shout out to my buddy Jens for lending me these guys. 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, which I thought was going to be really good the weekend. It was okay. And then 2 Droll and Lockbird with the 1 Called by the Grave. Really interesting ratios here. I feel like these 12 here, 12? Yeah, these 12 here are mandatory. I just want to try DD Crow. It, in theory, works out really well because it and Droll are both level 1s. So if I'm in a situation where I have to go normal summon DD Crow and then like have Poplar summon from hand effect or something, I can still get to Fucho against a deck like Tenpai Dragon and survive, which does come in to play at times. It's also really good because I've noticed a lot of the time people are leaving 2 level 1 fires in graveyard when they use the effect of Flamberge, and if I can just DD Crow one of those monsters, neither will come back, which is really good. It's also great at hitting something like a Promethean Princess, for example, or an opposing Garunix. There's a lot of really good options for me to be able to hit with DD Crow, and I want to play it. I did not see it the entire event, not a single time. I also, through the first 6 rounds of the event, I only drew 5 hand traps total. That's it. I was not drawing into my hand traps, not drawing into my non-engine at all. It was really frustrating, but hey, it is what it is. Call by, insane. You really have to play it. So good against so many different decks in the format, and Impulse is like the reason why I'm playing this version of the deck over the Snake Eye Fiendsmith version of the deck. I think that Impulse is just insane. Negating any special summon effect is ridiculous, so I want to have access to it, and that's why I decided to play the Fire King version, because obviously Impulse is that strong of a card. But that's going to be our main deck here. It is 44 cards. Really happy with the list. It made a lot of sense for me in the event. I was really happy with how it performed. Obviously, the variance with not seeing my non-engine did come up, but it wasn't the end of the world. We then have our extra deck, starting off with the 1 Garunix Eternity. This card is incredible. You have to play it in this version of the deck now because Alkanix gets you access to level modulation and an additional level 8 body, so you can much more easily get access to Tianga the Fire Kings, which is obviously really good. On summon, blows up all other monsters on the field, has an effect to destroy spell and trap cards as well and gain attack, and it also has the effect where if it's destroyed while it has material, you can summon back Fire King monsters from your graveyard up to the number of materials that this card had at the time it was destroyed, which comes up quite a bit to extend and to be able to just get extra bodies on the field to avoid a game shot from your opponent. We then have our Zombie Vampire here as our next level or rank 8 monster here. This card is ridiculous. You have to play Zombie Vampire. It is so strong because, again, level modulation is there. It's good for 2 reasons. Number 1, it can help you extend because if you mill a copy of Snake Eye Ash or Diabellstar from not just your graveyard, but from your opponents as well, then you're able to extend further, which is great because you make this exclusively with your Fire King combo. That being said, it also gives you information about what your opponent is playing. Are they playing a deck like Centurion? Are they playing a deck like the Mirror, which being Fire King Snake Eye Azamina, wow. But are they playing something, maybe it's going to be Tenpai Dragon? You get that knowledge right away, because if they're playing Tenpai Dragon and they don't open up Fualos, Shifter, Perulia, then you're going to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go for Zombie Vampire, mill their deck, I see it's a Chandra here, well that's great. Let me now make Fucho and I'll be fine. Speaking of which, here's Fucho. Fucho's great, you have to play it in the main deck in my opinion, it is that strong of a card, just to make sure you can protect yourself against Tenpai Dragon. If someone wins the die roll and says, you go first, you know they're on Tenpai, so you should have Fucho for that reason. One other note on Zombie Vampire, if you manage to bring back a card from your opponent's graveyard, like let's say a Dark the Dark Charmer, you can bring something back with that, or a Hita, then you can use that monster, regardless of its level, as a material for Zombie Vampire's Xyz, which is really cool. That's going to be it for our Xyz monsters though. Moving on to our fusions, we have the one Ilias Sylvia and the one Murasalago. These are the requirements for the Azamina engine. Resalago on summon searches you for a Sinful Spoils card, which is great. It can search you for OSS, it can search you for a Wanted. There's so many different things you can do with it. The main thing is you don't always want to be linking it off with something else and then using Hallowed Azamina to shuffle it back, because you open yourself up to Bestials. So at times you want to leave this card on the field and then use the effect of Hallowed, shuffle it back from the field to then use the Hallowed Azamina and chaining Wanted to get the max benefit from that interaction. But it's also really good because if it's destroyed by battle, I believe, and card effect as well, battle or card effect, yeah, you can add a Sinful Spoils spell card from your deck to your hand, which is really solid because you can add a copy of Wanted or OSS as well. Ilias Sylvia is your negate. It is a tribute for cost and then be able to negate anything that you want, negate an effect of anything that you want rather. It's also great because it can protect you from cards like Nibiru, for example. It can protect you from Droll and Lockbird if you can establish this quite early. If you go like Hallowed, Chain, Wanted, then you're good from Droll at that point, which is really nice. But yeah, these cards are really solid. You definitely want to end on them. I did not summon Resalago a single time during the entire event. It just happened to be that way where I needed to get to Ilias Sylvia earlier to play around something like Nibiru, for example, so I went to Ilias Sylvia originally. Next up, we have our links with Relinquished Anima as our first one. You have to play this in the deck because it makes Poplar a 1-card combo. You then have Hita and Dark as your 2 Charmer monsters. Hita gets you any fire, Dark gets you any dark monster. They're both great because you can steal Diabellstars with Dark, and you can steal like Snake Eye Ash or Ponic or Skurunix or whatever with Hita. It's also great because Hita always forces out opposing Promethean Princess. If you make Hita, your opponent has to go for Princess right there, and while that sucks because you lose Hita, you're actually gaining a body as well, because when it's destroyed by card effect, or by your opponent rather I should say, this card will let you search for a fire with 15 or less defense and add it to your hand. So it can be a Poplar, it can be a copy of Kirin, it can be a Ponix, for example. There's so many different options that you can go with, and Hita can definitely get you there. There was a game where I was really behind the 8-ball and I went summon out Hita. My opponent didn't have Princess in their graveyard, but I went to battle phase, attacked into their monster, crashed, and used the effect to be able to add Poplar to hand, Poplar special summon, all these effects that would activate, and it was allowing me to really just play the game effectively because I was able to crash with Hita as well. We then have our Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf to round off our Firelink 2s, with our IP Masquerena and SP Little Knight to round off the rest of our Link 2s. Sunlight Wolf is great because you're able to mill cards with Zombie Vampire, or you're able to destroy a copy of Ash Blossom in your hand with Alkanix's effect, and then you can use Sunlight Wolf to bring it back to your hand, which is really nice. And worst case scenario, you can use it to bring back a copy of Snake Eye Oak to hand, which is going to allow you to have follow-up for the following turn, which is really good. IP is part of the end board, you place it in the graveyard to revive it back with another card, and then SP is a card you make on your opponent's turn with the IP, and can be used to out a lot of very problematic cards. Then for our Link 3s and higher, we have the one Promethean Princess, fantastic card, like insane. This card is ridiculously good. We have the one Anvil Whale. I make this pretty much every single game with the one Raging Phoenix and the one copy of World Sea Dragon Zelantis. I never made these two. The combo just never came up for me to get the OTK. I would either win because my guys are just huge or because I would have more card advantage than my opponents. But these cards I think are really necessary in the deck. If you don't want to play these, you don't have to. I think they're really useful though, and I would recommend it very highly. Moving on to the side deck though, we have our copies of Triple, Tactic, Thrust. I have 2 copies here. I only have the 2 copies. Mismatching rarities. Shout out to Bonanza here for this. It was really cool to have access to this card finally. If you have 3, you can play 3. Would I do it? Probably not. I really wanted to play a lot of Thrust targets here, and if I played 3 of them, then I would have to cut down on those cards. So my Thrust targets are Triple Tactic Talents when I'm going second to steal opposing monsters or just figure out what hand traps my opponent has. I have Soul Release here, specifically for the mirror match. Soul Release is just ridiculous against this deck, and I'm going to do an updated how to beat guide for Snake Eye Fire King Azamina, and Soul Release is like the best card to draw against that deck when you're going second because it just shuts off so many different plays they could possibly have. Duster is here as well for like random trap decks or rogue decks or anything like that. I just want to have a big blowout against a lot of different strategies, and Duster kind of helps with that. For going first, I have the Different Dimension Ground and the Dimensional Barrier. DDG is here specifically for the mirror match, any Snake Eye matchup, any deck where like they really need the graveyard to function. So DDG is here for that. But Dimensional Barrier is here almost exclusively for a deck like Centurion and, more importantly, Tenpai Dragon. I want to be able to make sure that if they go for Shifter, I can just go Thrust, set Dimensional Barrier, pass turn, and at that point there, I'm going to survive pretty much just fine because I have other ways to play as well. We then have our 2 copies of Nibiru. I didn't have space for a third one. I also didn't have space for the third Cosmic Cyclone or the third copy of Droplet as well, because I am playing the one Skill Drain and the one Nightmare Phoenix in the side deck here. Nib never came in a single time in the entire event. I had other cards I wanted to bring in. I was really liking the way the Thrust package was working, so I decided to play that. And Nib just honestly, with the fact that I wasn't seeing any hand traps, it didn't make sense for me to play the Nib at all. Cosmic Cyclone, really good against a lot of different matchups, great against decks like Centurion, great against decks like Fire King, Snake Eye, Azamina, of course, and so many decks that play a lot of Floodgates, like Skill Drain, like Deck Lockdown, for example. A lot of really good choices. Droplet also never came in a single time, but it was a really good choice in my opinion. Would I play it again going forward? I don't know. I want to test it out a bit more, but I originally had 3 of it in the side deck, and I decided to cut down to 2 to fit the Different Dimension Ground, and I think that decision was well warranted. Skill Drain is Skill Drain. It steals you games. It was fantastic. You have to play it in this deck because you can turn it off so easily, and the Nightmare Phoenix is what I was playing when I needed to side out my copy of Fujo. But that's it. That's the list for my Snake Eye Fire King Azamina deck. I really like the way the deck plays. I think the deck is extremely fun. There's so much that you can do with it, so many different divergent combo lines and ways to just outgrind your opponent while also being able to put up a really nasty end board. It's a deck that I really like this format a lot, and it is one of the reasons why I think this format is so much fun. Now, you will notice there was no Fucho, or Fubalos, excuse me, there was no Perulia. I don't own the Mulcharmies. If I did own the Mulcharmies, I would definitely main 3 copies of Fuwalos over the DD Crows, and I would just play 45 in the list. Maybe I cut down a Kieran or an Ulcanix, but I feel pretty good at going to 45. And if I had the Perulia, I would definitely play them in the side deck as well, because against a deck like this one, Perulia is so damn good. But that's it. That's the list. I feel really good about the engine requirements. The non-engine, you can kind of work around yourself and just play whatever you really want to. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think about this deck down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on the format as a whole as well? And did you participate in the remote YCS 2? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I ended up going X3 drop. It was not the greatest event for me. I started out the event going 4-0. I was just doing really well. I beat Centurion, Fire King, Snake Eye, Azamina. Then I beat Centurion again. Then I beat Tenpai Dragon. Then I kind of went up against another Fire King, Snake Eye, Azamina. I felt like I should have had a draw there, but I had a bad ruling go against me. It is what it is, and it ended up being a loss. I then went up against a Yubel player, and I felt like I couldn't really do too much. They had a really solid hand game 1 that just could play through all my interruption, and then game 2 I opened up, I think, again, really solid, but they just had the better hand, and at that point I didn't feel like I played my interruptions maybe well enough to deal with how good their hand was. So that's a learning experience for me. And then the last game was against it was against Snake Eye Fiendsmith. And that one there, I bricked game 1, and then game 2, I bricked as well, and that's just how it is. I definitely felt like I was at a disadvantage though by not having Fuwa lost, but it didn't feel like it was so insurmountable that I just had no chance of winning without it. So that just shows how good this deck actually is. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will see you all next time.